I launched 4 businesses at the same time. I consider my divorce the greatest gift I've ever received in my life. What's really wonderful about rock bottom, which I reached, was that was the moment I realized, okay, now it's time to look up. I'm not perfect. I made a mistake. I'm not exactly where I want to be, and I'm cool with it.
Keren, welcome to the show. I'm super excited to see you today.
Amber, thank you so much. I'm so honored and so happy to be here today.
I couldn't hit record fast enough because we are already talking all kinds of stuff. And I was like, girl, if you drop one more gem that my listeners aren't hearing, this is going to be a problem. So I was like, okay, we got to hit record. And one of the things I didn't know about you before we started talking is I didn't know that you also are a divorced woman. And what I was saying to you right before we hit record is, God, I'm so fired up to interview women just like yourself who are a shining light and an inspiration for women navigating divorce to show them what is possible for their life, even after divorce.
I consider my divorce the greatest gift I've ever received in my life. Like 50% of Americans, especially my age, I'm in my 40s. And honestly, if I can convey one message to everybody today, it's that if you saw the size of the blessing that's coming, you would go through this willingly.
Oh, girl, I
know how
just got
brutal it
chills.
is.
Oh, yes.
I know how brutal it is. I remember how brutal it is. My husband's lawyer was German to make things even worse than a normal divorce. But gosh, if I had seen what was coming, I would have allowed myself to just slide through it like I was at Six Flags or something.
Yes, like if you were here, I'd be high-fiving you because I know, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think this is so much of why my mission for this show is to just show women what's possible, because I agree. Like if you would have asked me 6 years ago if I ever thought that I would be where I'm at and doing what I'm doing, and really at 46 years old, settled into the woman that I am, and I even get chills talking about it, I would never have believed you, because my divorce was the most traumatic, second to my dad dying in my 30s, the most traumatic thing I have ever dealt with in my life. And in that moment, and you know this, right? It's like when you're in it, God, you can't even see what's next. But I know for me, like my biggest kind of the big aha or the shift for me was just really learning to trust and lean in and just trust that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, even though it hurt like hell. I didn't know what was next. I was scared, all the things. And I'm so grateful that I did that because it opened up the world of possibilities for me. And here we are.
Yeah, so let's make this so for everybody who's listening.
Yes, girl. Okay, we cannot kick this off without at least giving a shout out to your new book, Gilded. I really want to talk about this today because I am really, really excited to talk about this book. So I'm just curious, just what led you to writing this book, Gilded?
Well, I've been writing this book for 7 years, so pretty much since I started my business, because I really, really wanted my clients, instead of recommending at least 20 books to them during the course of coaching, recommending one that actually followed their process and gave them all the information they needed in one place. Unfortunately, most people who are misguided at the beginning of writing a book, I wasn't particularly concise. We were talking about this a little bit before our conversation. When we're beginning our businesses, we're not fully attuned to who the audience is and what exactly the message they need to hear is. We're also not fully aware of what our gifts are, what our specialization is. But as the years evolved, the work evolved. And with time, I started to understand that the common theme was a gilded cage, a big old
a
golden
common
cage.
theme for what that you're saying?
For overachievers that I specialize in. These are people who are not overachievers in career specifically. They are highly intense. They are obsessive. They have perfectionism as one of their particular defaults. They are relentlessly in pursuit. They really want to get this life right. As a result of that, they tend to box themselves into lives that look very shiny on Instagram, but don't feel as good on the inside. And that's when I received the analogy of the gilded cage from my husband. He was saying that's pretty much it. That's the analogy. It's not real gold, and you're locking yourself on the inside when you can break free. What if we could talk about breaking free and all the antidote to these behavioral defaults that have basically pigeonholed you somewhere that you don't belong? Now let's talk about divorce. Many times divorce happens because we realize that that's exactly what's happening. We're in an institutional covenant that feels right to society and can look great on Instagram. Look at me and my husband or my partner, and it doesn't feel good on the inside. So many marriages are dead in the water. So many marriages are sexless.
Yeah.
So many marriages are angry and codependent and just feel terrible. This is not a real marriage. And when I started to lean into this isn't real versus what is real, that helped me to really write the book that I was meant to write.
I'm listening, and what's coming up for me is I'm like, girl, I am your ideal client. Okay. Like I am, because this is something I've struggled with my whole life, this perfectionist mindset. And I actually think that a lot of women suffer from the perfectionist mindset, because I think from an early age, this is the conditioning that we are brought up in, that we have to look perfect, be quiet, be quiet, but yet be powerful. And, but don't be too powerful, because then you're a bitch, and like all the things, right? Like, it's just, we are sent so many messages from an early age about, I think, this idea of perfectionism. And this is something that's been an issue for me my whole life. It's been the thing for me that has catapulted me into these realms of success that I have found myself in. And I'm grateful for that, but it's also been my biggest shadow. Of course. Right? It's also been the thing that really holds me back and causes the most anxiety and stress in my life.
One of my pet peeves is when people say my only flaw is perfectionism. And I'm like, all right, okay. Simmer down now. Let's talk about what perfectionism is, so other people can maybe identify themselves in this. There's a very big difference between perfectionism and high standards, and this is a really important distinction. High standards are wonderful. I happen to like them. As you can see, I'm good looking and charming and well read. These are great standards to have. Go to the gym, feel good about yourself, read well, polish yourself. However, perfectionism hurts. High standards do not hurt. If I missed a workout, I wouldn't beat the crap out of myself. If I ate a little improperly, if I missed something, if I misspoke, I wouldn't speak harshly to myself. The perfectionist can recognize themselves in harsh self-talk and, fun fact, in aggressive, perhaps not even spoken, but aggressive judgment of others. You are hypercritical of yourself and of others. If that's your MO, here's what this is costing you. You're making decisions that are shallow. You are many times trying very hard to maintain something that you know sucks, but because you want to maintain it and you want to keep up with the Joneses or just keep measuring up, you'll just maintain that position instead of breaking it apart in favor of what can be. Like I said, the blessing you'll find on the other side, if you are willing to break free, is much bigger than anything you're bargaining for now. And that's really why perfectionism is, to me, the biggest gate through which we have to walk for our freedom.
Absolutely. And I'm curious for you is why you're so passionate about this is because are you a recovering or recovered perfectionist? And I always tell people, I'm like, I would love to say I'm a recovered perfectionist. No, I'm not. I'm still
recovered,
a perfectionist.
Please.
I'm not. I'm still a perfectionist. I have to check myself all the freaking time with it. Okay.
Amber, you think your ego is just going to quit his job? Right. He's union. He's union. You can't fire him. Your ego is going to walk with you all the way to the grave. But you will get much more sophisticated in dealing with him. So I am a recovering perfectionist. But yes, of course, all ideal clients are a former version of ourselves. They are somewhere behind us in the journey. That's all the difference, right? We've just walked a little bit faster and a little bit farther than they have at this point. And when I wrote Gilded, I really wanted people to start to see that everything they're maintaining is that magnificent facade, is that plumage of accomplishment, is phony baloney, and it's really hard for you to maintain. Underneath those magnificent feathers, you are paddling really, really hard with your feet to just look like you're gliding. The first step in this book is to admit that you have a problem, and that brings me to my story. More than 10 years ago, God, time flies when you're having fun. More than 10 years ago, I had it all. I had done everything perfectly, Amber. I was a perfect daughter and a perfect student. I was always really good. I was an officer in the Army. Then I went to the absolute best schools, and I got straight A's in the first university and in my master's degree as well, in very, very highfalutin schools. Then I got a really beautiful job that looked fantastic on paper, and I climbed that ladder steadily with promotions every year, accolades and awards. And the best part was, I married a tall man. As we all know, that is the height of all feminine ambitions. I married a tall man with good hair who looked great next to me on Instagram. And then we moved into a beautiful big house, and I decorated it to the nines and hosted people at dinner parties like I was a Stepford wife from Connecticut. Here's the problem. One day I found myself suicidal in the shower. By suicidal, please forgive the trigger warning, but it is very, very common. Suicidal ideation. I've been a suicide counselor for many years, and I know how common it is. I realized in that shower that I'd messed up so badly that I couldn't find a way out. The marriage was actually abusive. I was not just in a bad marriage. I was in a marriage that was cruel and in which I feared for my physical safety almost all the time. I was sleeping in the library. I couldn't stand the sight of him. So that beautiful house, only served a purpose by being big. In addition, I was living in a city that I absolutely despised, Zurich. For a New Yorker, Zurich is the city that never stops stopping. No offense, Zurich, but you're not New York City. And I had been numbing myself down, the term is dumbing yourself down, really toning myself down for so long that I really felt like I was living in some kind of a hall of mirrors where I'm pretending to be something I'm not, which also caused me to get a very glamorous job, a very good job, but not the job that was right for me. I wasn't doing what was really lighting my soul up on fire. So I'm basically dimming every system. And in addition to that, I've spent so much money keeping up with the Joneses that guess what? I got some financial issues too. So in that shower, as I was listening to the only sad song ABBA ever wrote, it's called My Love, My Life. For some reason, I think God spared me. I snapped out of it. Something really amazing happened. And I remember coming out of that shower with no clear indication of where I would go next, but with the same epiphany that every woman who has ever decided to go through a divorce has ever had. By the way, 75% of us are those who initiate the divorce. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that epiphany was, this ends now.
Yes, girl, I just got the chills all through my freaking body. That decisive moment, right? And I tell the story of me looking in the mirror when I was going through divorce in the bad, in the depths of hell, puffy eyes. And it was like all of a sudden my higher self, my 25-year-old self showed up and said basically the same message. This ends now. I think she first said, who the fuck are you? And then, who the fuck are you right now? Get a grip, girl. And this ends now. Yeah. And so what did you do next?
The only things I did next were take a blowtorch to the life and go through it. I understood two things in that this ends now moment. Number one, I understood that I had a problem, which I had been numbing for too long with work and pretty things and pretending that everything's okay. That numbing ended that day. I was ready to speak up about my pain, and I was ready to say this is not okay. That's huge, by the way. As you know, in Alcoholics Anonymous, Chapter 1, admit you have a problem.
Yeah.
Gilded, which might as well be called Workaholics Anonymous. Step 1, admit it. Your life is not very good. And number 2, the second thing I was open to was the suggestion that whatever had been could go, that I could let it go because it was not worth very much. So I started by going through the divorce, by literally announcing, hey, we're getting divorced. Good luck with your life. Mm-hmm. To my ex-husband. It was, of course, a horrible, messy, painful, really creepy experience. Like he had me followed and just strange nonsense. He took all of my things. He was so aggressive. Today, I think none of that was necessary, but okay, whatever. Thanks for proving to me what a jackass you are. And then really starting to dismantle that life, leaving the corporate job, looking for a new purpose. Unfortunately, because the universe operates this way, my cats died, and also I lost all my things in a fire in that exact same period. So basically, my life is decimated at this point. And what's really wonderful about rock bottom, which I reached, was that was the moment I realized, okay, now it's time to look up. And this is when the self-help books start flooding my house. As you can see, they're still behind me. And I start attending weird seminars like Tony Robbins and Esther Hicks. And little by little, Amber, they did change my mindset. And they completely changed my conceptualization of myself to the point where I could start asking the bigger questions of what have I come here for? And the rest, as they say, is history.
I'm so curious how you made, because part of, as what my coaching business is helping divorced moms to start an online coaching business of their own. And so I'm so fascinated when I talk to entrepreneurs of how you, and I love sharing this with the listeners, of like how you made that leap. How did you go from like blowtorching your life? And I know you started with the self-help books, but then getting to where you are now. How did you decide to go into coaching?
Trial and error. I like to say that only Martin Luther King had a dream. I had a very lengthy experiment. I allowed myself first to work with coach after coach, what I could afford, and ultimately I became such a believer in coaching, I was ready to fork over absolutely anything for the absolute best, which is what I recommend always. And then I started to particularly understand that I have a real teaching streak. I'm really an uplifter. I'm a born entertainer, which 100%. I had no idea, by the way.
Yes,
Literally had no idea. No, I'm not kidding, because I was so corporate and I toned that down so much, particularly because I didn't want to be offensive to men, that I really had no idea that this was in me at all. Turns out I'm Mrs. Maisel. Yeah. And Once I start to really unpack that, I essentially launched 4 businesses at the same time to just sort of try and see what stuck. Low-hanging fruit, all the way to most desired fruit. Low-hanging fruit because Keren is broke and has to play it safe and needs to pay her exorbitant rent in New York City. And far-reaching fruit because it's nice to ask the universe for things and to see what happens, right? See what you can get away with. And I'm proud to tell you that from the minute I launched the coaching business, from the minute I announced that I had a certain number of available positions available in coaching for clients, to my fakakta tiny little LinkedIn list of 500 people at the time, I sold out and I continued to sell out. People were buying it and it was just magnificent. That's how the business has grown.
I love that.
Hi, doggy.
You see her. She's so needy. She does. It's like when she knows that I'm on a podcast, she wants to come up. I want to go back and talk about something though that you mentioned that, and I'm gonna be honest, I've never talked about this publicly before, but I feel called to, because you mentioned it, I feel called to talk about it. You mentioned that in the shower that you were suicidal. And I am curious if you find, and I want to normalize this conversation for other women maybe who may be feeling this. Do you find that perfectionist, that thought maybe comes up more times than people would even realize? And the reason why I'm asking, and I'm just asking because I would, and this is the part I've never admitted in public before, I have absolutely over the years of my life had suicidal thoughts. And I didn't know how to make sense of it because from the outside looking in, my life has always seemed perfect, right? Everything has always, I've always been very, all the things. But in the past, when I've had those moments of suicide, it's those moments of thinking like, God, I wouldn't even care if I died tomorrow. At least all this would be over. At least like all of this stress and this constant, I love that you talked about like almost like, what is it? The duck that's like looks seamless on the water and then underneath is like
Paddling.
Paddling. And there's been, multiple moments in my life where I think, God, if this just were, I just want this all to end. If this just were all to end, that wouldn't be so bad. Then I just I wouldn't be struggling so much. And I'm curious if this is something that is more common than we may realize with perfectionists that maybe just is not talked about.
It's extremely common. And it's not only common, it's been demonstrated with the academic knowledge that we have to be not only causal, but correlational. So it's correlated with perfectionists, and it's what causes perfectionists to become suicidal. Their perfectionism causes the suicidal ideation, is what I was trying to say. There's a wonderful story with which I begin my last season of Coached, my podcast, where I talked about a story that I heard over the summer in the Hamptons. I go to the Hamptons every summer because I'm a very fancy person. And they're always super gossipy, so they're always talking about the story du jour. And this year's story was particularly sad. Over the July 4th weekend, a guy named Brandon Miller had died by suicide by inhaling fumes in his garage. And then that became a huge story. It was in the New York Times. It was in the Daily Mail. It was like literally in every newspaper, covered to death because he was extremely attractive and tall and golden boy and successful. His wife was an influencer who was constantly parading her fashion choices on Instagram and her huge lavish parties on Instagram. Their lifestyle was incredibly lavish. They had a boat, an $8 million house in Southampton, a Park Avenue apartment, you name it, they were doing it. The $1,000 facial, they were there. And it turned out that it had just been about a decade of this poor guy trying to keep up appearances. He was $17 million in debt, at least. He had not told, apparently, his wife even what was really going on. He was in deep suffering, and that perfectionism, that need to look like he's got it together, that need to look like he hasn't messed up, was eating him alive. And it did. It did eat him alive. Perfectionists are very aggressive with ourselves. As a result of that, the way of thinking is, well, I'll just check out. At least I won't be a burden to people. Or I'll admit this defeat. We'll literally take it out on ourselves. And that's why suicidal ideation is common. If you are listening and you don't just have suicidal ideation, but you also have a means and a timeline, please reach out to Crisis Text Line. We will be there to support you and walk you through it. It is very serious. In Amber, in my case, it sounds like, and I really, really applaud you for speaking about this openly. I do too. And by the way, that's why I also speak about being in an abusive situation. I want people to see that even people like me, there's no shame in this. This happens to us. And this happens to us because we are perfectionists, because we're trying so hard to keep it together. Why do you think anorexia nervosa and bulimia are associated with
Well,
perfectionism.
yeah. I mean, I was bulimic in my 20s. I mean,
Yeah.
100. So this is something that's plagued me my entire life.
It's a control disorder, and these disorders come from overzealousness around control, and that overzealousness around control comes from, as Brene Brown says, having a fictitious measuring stick, and if you don't hit that exact mark on the measuring stick, you think you are a failure. That makes you very, very aggressive with yourself. This is something to be aware of. If you've taken it too far, once again, please get help. And if not, then at least have the wherewithal to understand, like me and like Amber, that this is not serving you. This is not cool. It's not serving you. And there is a much better way. All you're going to have to do is loosen up those standards a little bit.
I know, but that is so much easier said
than done.
And I will say this too, for me, I think why, and probably why I've never talked about it, is because I didn't have like a timeline and a means. Like I wasn't like, I don't think I had not gotten to that place in my mindset yet, but I just, even having those thoughts though, because I think it was just in those moments where I've felt that way, it was really the exhaustion of just being totally and utterly exhausted, mentally, physically, all of it, of just trying to do it all, all the time. So so thank you.
And that's why I said it's causal, because at some point you're going to break. You will have to let go.
Yeah.
And what I want to promise you is that when you do loosen up those standards, you will not actually get things that are less good. You will get things that feel good instead of things that look good. And if you ask me, I'd much rather have something that feels good every day of the week. Let's talk about my husband for a second. Can I talk about my husband?
Yes, girl. Let's do it.
Can I talk about my darling husband?
Yes.
I have married the most delicious person in all of America. I'm sorry, ladies. He's taken. His name is Ryan. He's from the great state of North Dakota. He is a real guy. You know what I mean? On paper, and when I met him, I just thought, this makes no sense for me. We have very little in common. The truth is, he is pure honey on the inside. Being around him made me feel safe and easy from the very beginning. There was no drama. There was no fireworks. There was none of that ridiculous codependency that came with my former relationships. I was home. So what would I rather have? Something that looks fantastic on Instagram next to a banker that, I don't know, my friends assume is a really wonderful catch? Or something that feels like home? That is what we're aiming for. And that, I hope, is what Gilded convinces people to do. I want to take you step by step, and I want to walk you home.
How, when we go back to, loosening up the standards, I was going to say, like, first of all, congratulations finding the most delicious man. And maybe does he have a brother? I'm just kidding. No.
He does. And his brother just got divorced. And he's handsome too.
But no, going back to loosening up the standards, it's easier than done. But it's like, for me, I'm like, okay, I would definitely have to have like a lobotomy, I feel like, to loosen up the standards. I don't even know where to start with that.
Let me help you. Number one, realize that it's not working for you. Literally, just come to terms with the fact is, how's that working for you? Let's talk about business for a second. You want to continue to be a perfectionist? You're going to be insane. You'll be a solopreneur for the rest of your life. You'll never be able to delegate. You'll never be able to think 10x because you're so busy managing all these tiny details that the best you can achieve is maybe 30% growth. This is absolutely detrimental for business owners. Perfect is garbage. As Reid Hoffman, the founder of Salesforce, once said, if you launch perfect, you launched way too late. And that is something that already has to be the tripping point. The second thing that I want to say is you'll have to learn self-compassion. The real road to freedom is something that I spend a couple of chapters on in Gilded because it's that important. Kristen Neff has dedicated entire books to it. So has the great Brene Brown. Obviously, her entire body of work is around this. But ultimately, what's going to happen is you will have to develop real vulnerability. Real vulnerability, there's a simple word for it, is honesty. It's being able to be honest with, I'm not perfect. I made a mistake. I'm not exactly where I want to be. And I'm cool with it. And by the way, you make mistakes and you're not perfect either. One of the best ways to do that is get off LinkedIn, a cesspool of lies. It's the worst one, if you ask me. But more importantly, it's just to learn how to speak to yourself with self-compassion. To do that, I keep a baby picture of myself nearby. I was a really cute baby, very fat, very delicious. And I always think, you remember like when you said that your 25-year-old self appeared? You would never be mean to her. I would never be mean to a 25-year-old girl. I would definitely never be mean to a little baby. And when I think about the way I speak to myself sometimes, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And I must remind myself that I am speaking to a baby. And so I switch to the language of forgiveness. It's okay. You're okay. There's still time. You got this. A typo in a newsletter doesn't make people hate you. Don't worry. You can still fix it.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And that is a habit that needs to be developed and cultivated. This allows you, first of all, to be softer with yourself and to be softer with everybody else. And ultimately, you'll start to see what Reid Hoffman meant, which is launch. Just go. You have one life around here. Stop being fixated with nonsensical details and driving everybody crazy.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Becoming an entrepreneur has been my greatest teacher or trying to loosen the reins of perfectionism, because if you, as an entrepreneur, you're right, you will get in your own way. I mean, you cannot with every post, when I first started, even with social media, I mean, spending like an hour, 2 hours doing one single post. I'm like, oh dear God. Like now I'm like 5 minutes and I'm done. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, we're out the door. We're done.
And I don't care. I genuinely don't care. I remember starting to record my audios and not editing out the coughs, which was a breakthrough for me, because I think people should learn that human beings cough.
Right.
I think it's okay to clear your throat.
Yeah.
Why do I think it's so unacceptable to clear my throat? Do you see what I'm saying? And I know that might be irritating to people who really do have more exacting standards than mine, but for me, it's a breakthrough.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, one of the things you talk about is that there is a big difference between being successful and being fulfilled. And can you dive into that a little bit? How do you define the difference between the two?
I think if there's one thing that typically exemplifies my clients, it's that they are successful by any measure, but they are not fulfilled. Success is attainment of a certain degree of accomplishment or accolade, when fulfillment feels like freedom. It has nothing to do with accolade. It is satisfaction with things as they are and eagerness. Success is more associated in our society today with a relentless pursuit of more. Honestly, even just thinking about that old version of success makes me tired. It's very never enough. Honestly, there's no coincidence with the fact that Gilded is now #1 in the category of anxiety in Amazon, right?
Yeah.
The anxiety is very, very typical of success. And I always say another thing that it costs them is not just competitiveness and constant anxiety or relentless pursuit, but also aimlessness. They're not really living on their purpose, where satisfaction is by default purpose driven, because that's why you're so satisfied. You're naturally doing things that deliver fulfillment to you. If you are not there, it's time to switch modes and it's time to do the work to close that gap, because I believe personally that success without fulfillment is ultimate failure. It's worth nothing. I like to say about some people, they're so rich, they're so poor, all they have is money. And that's really what I mean. I mean, they have nothing but the maintenance of a facade. There's nothing inside it. If you look behind those gates, all they're doing is scrolling all the time, and they're miserable, and their lives are empty, and their relationships are not real. That's not very useful. I'd like to apologize on behalf of my dogs.
You are fine. At first, I was like, damn, is that my dog? She doesn't ever bark like that. But I was like, she must see something. You're fine.
It's the dogs. It's the dogs. Maybe we can edit that bark out, or just leave it for people to deal with the bark.
See, the perfectionist in me says, let's edit it. But then I say, no, let's not.
Let her bark.
One of the things that I've realized about success and fulfillment, and I know, and I talk to, other multiple 7-figure business owners, and they will all say the same thing. And I was talking to a friend of mine who has a very successful company, and she was like, I can just remember when I first started my job, and when I first started my company, I was like, man, if I could just get to 30K months, like it's going to be great. I'm going to be winning. And she's like, and then I got to 30K months. And then it was, okay, if I just get to 100K, right? And I think, it
never ends. The target never stops moving.
Ends.
It's terrible. Exactly.
Yeah. And I was telling my mom this the other day. I was like, you know what, Mom? I was like, I'm really focusing on being satisfied with where I'm at now. Because if I don't, there's always the next level to get to. Because in business, and you know this to be true, in business, it's like once you get to that next level, in order to scale it to the next level, then you have to invest in new things. You have to bring on new team members. You have to up the ad spend. You have to do all the things. And so then you're just constantly raising the bar. And I think that this is true for people who make $5,000 a month to people who make $7 million a month. I think it's the same story if you don't keep this in check.
Well, there's 2 really important points to underline here. Very well said. The first is marriage and success are 2 things that should feel good to you. Period. The end. if they don't feel good, in other words, if they don't feel like home, if they don't feel like satisfaction, if you're looking elsewhere for anything else, something is off. This is really, really important. The second thing to understand is that relentless pursuit is going to ruin something really good for you. The absolute goal, I believe, for anybody building a coaching business, especially this business, because it's a sacred business, in the first 2 years is not to scale or to get to 30K months.
Right.
It's to be a really, really good coach. The only thing that's really magnificent here is what you are creating. It is not the creation. It is the exaltation that you will feel in the delivery of your talks, of your appearances, and your interactions. It is not the end result. Here's the deal. If you decide to become addicted again to end results, they will always fail you. Always. It's like I just had an unbelievable month in business and I bought myself a jacket and I was really excited about the jacket for exactly 1 hour. It's just the way it is.
I want to know what jacket it was first.
Balenciaga leather jacket. Thank you very much. Cost as much as a lot of other jackets. It was really fantastic. But again, seriously, who cares? I mean, genuinely, who cares? The target is always going to move. And I already know that. So how do we approach scaling the healthy way, the happy way? Yeah. You understand that the joy is in learning how to scale. The joy is in that creation. It's in becoming a person who knows how to build things, who is learning new skills, who is becoming more through the learning of the new skill. That's what's really magnificent about scaling. It's the opposite of stagnation. It's not the ringing of the occasional bell. That is the point here.
And you bring up such a huge point. And for my entrepreneurs or women who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneurs, this is such an important lesson that I don't want you to miss, because I experienced this in my first couple years of business, my first few years of business, that really, really took a toll on my life and my business and all of it. And it was the fact that if you don't learn how to enjoy the process and settle into the process of scaling, when you do have that like occasional bell that you ring and you have your biggest month, you are not the person that you need to be in order to maintain that. And so like what happened to me was I would have like a really big month and I'd be like, okay, I'm here and let's like scale. But I wasn't the CEO that I needed to be in order to maintain that level of success. Then I would backtrack, right? But then I'd already invested in things to scale the business and now I'm in the hole. And so it's such a huge...
You're just not ready.
You're not ready. You're not ready.
And you take a beating too. One of my clients is starting to build a coaching business and she had a really, really amazing event. And then the next day, the social media didn't reflect how wonderful she was, the way that she was in the event. And she was like taking a big beating. And I looked at her and I was like, what do you think this is? What do you think this game is? You think it's all going to be puppies and ponies and rainbows? Come on. In other words, and I didn't say grow a pair or anything nonsensical like that, but I really want people to understand entrepreneurship is designed to be hard. It is not for the faint of heart. It is for people who are truly ready to understand it. And the only way to navigate it is to have a why so great, a purpose so great, a true love of the endeavor that is so big that it can overcome the ups and the downs, because the ups and downs will happen, even if you're supremely talented.
Yes. I'm curious for you when you were starting off, because I mean, girl, hats off to you that you launched 4 businesses at what time. I'm like, girl, you're
they were technically,
like a bionic woman.
They were all like hustles. They were all hustles. Like one of them was I was working with a friend of mine in an event business. Another one was a business development consulting. That was my low hanging fruit because that's what I did before. So I had the potential to do big client contracts, which was really great because that kept the business, me, afloat for a very long time while I was building my other business. The third was the coaching business. That's the only one that's like pure Keren launches real business. And the fourth, like many people, was real estate license, which PS, super fun, really, really hard to exist on until you build a book of business.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Basically what I was doing was hedging my bets, which was really smart. And I say this to all entrepreneurs. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because the worst thing that can happen to you in your early years of entrepreneurship is running out of money. Mm-hmm. That's why having an anchor job, and I've done episodes like this literally on my podcast to try to convince people, because a lot of entrepreneurs have very bombastic behavioral styles and they like to go very fast. I'm quite lucky. I look bombastic, but I move very slowly, slow and steady. Yeah. And I did it right. I had something paying my bills while I was launching coaching.
Yes.
So I wasn't
Yes.
dependent on coaching, which is super important because then you're A, going to be able to invest in the business because businesses cost money. And B, you're not going to quit just because you run out of money, which is a dumb reason to quit. Love,
Yes.
Keren.
Yeah. XO Keren. Yes. Listen, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. Whenever I coach my women, I tell them like, keep your job,
Yeah.
I don't want that added stress. And what I love about your story though, and this is really like my underlying mission for helping women to start their online coaching businesses. There's actually a much deeper reasoning for me. It's really because I am so effing passionate about women making their own damn money.
Baby, it's freedom.
Yeah.
It's freedom.
Yes. I never again want to hear from another woman if I can help them, that they stayed in a situation because of money. And so that is really where my passion lies. But I think that what I love about your story though is just how scrappy you got after your divorce. Listeners, I want you guys to pay attention when she said she basically had 4 side hustles going on. That is the definition of being resourceful and scrappy. And I would imagine, Keren, it's because at that time you had an abundance mindset. Like, okay, I can do this. And this is what I see a lot of women coming out of divorce who are afraid of not having money, afraid of being able to, financially independent. They go into this scarcity mindset and then all of the possibilities they are blinded to because they are so stuck in that fearful scarcity mode.
I'm going to say something controversial.
I love it.
There's no such thing as not enough money. It's hard, for sure. I've been broke a couple of times. But what's really important to understand is poverty is a mindset. Broke is a temporary state. Poverty is a mindset. It's a really big problem. It self-perpetuates for sure. But broke, which is what comes to most of us, particularly after divorce, because most women lose an enormous amount of their financial security in divorce, is a temporary state. What if you thought instead of my bank account is dwindling and terrifying me, you thought the thought, my bank account is open and ready to receive? What if you started thinking that way? That will already start to attune you to the other possibilities of what you can sell, of what you can do, etc. One of my best moments in my life was during the broke period when I really, really wanted to pay my rent because I had to by law. And it was $4,400 and I had exactly $37. Now this, Amber, is a problem. Would you agree?
Yes.
And my credit cards are maxed out too, just FYI. Because again, a little bit of a Prada habit, which luckily at that point after the fire had already subsided, but I'm still carrying a lot of debt. Yeah. So I started thinking, because I've been coached within an inch of my life at this point, first thought that comes to my mind is, I need to relax. So what if I am this freaked out and sad in Miami instead of in New York? I think it's much more fun to be freaked out in Miami than in New York, and I'm much more likely to chill out. And then I thought, how do I find a way to Miami? And then I realized that credit card debt equals credit card miles. And those credit card miles bought me a first-class ticket to Miami, thank you very much, to hang out with a friend who I knew would pay for my meals. Yes? Yes? So far, so good?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
At this relaxed point, I start making what I call a magic 20, which is when I sit down and write a list of 20 action steps I can take to my goal. It's very important that it be 20. Most people will come up with 5, no problem. Have you ever tried coming up with 20 ways to make money? That's really hard. And I came up with lots of creative ideas. By the end of that weekend, I had made $7,000 by selling stuff, by creating proposals that sold, by figuring out other things. And by the way, by having another epiphany, which was borrow money, which I had never considered before. I knew I'd be good for it. I would never not pay a debt. I also have a very mean friend who has a lot of money. And I knew that because she was super mean, she would hold me to it. That was it. That was the moment I broke free from the money problems. I started to understand that if I had a heart attack tomorrow or one of my animals was sick, I would find that money. Mm-hmm. And that is what changes everything. Mm-hmm. And this is a very critical skill for entrepreneurs and business owners, because you literally, as Jim Collins says, your job is to not run out of money. That is the number one job.
Yes, absolutely. God, I can remember when I first started my business and I just didn't, because one of the things that nobody tells you about, especially like, even as like a divorced mom and like starting over, but then also as an entrepreneur, is like when you become an entrepreneur and when you become a coach, it's like being a coach is just a piece of it, but learning how to be a CFO of your business, I think that and learning how to be a master marketer, those two skills right there
Absolutely.
have been the hardest to be able to learn.
They are. And they come a little more naturally, I think, to some people. As someone who filed her taxes earlier today, I totally understand what you're saying. But they are not impossible to learn. And this is also very important. I don't want anybody to feel imposter syndrome around the managing of money. If there's one thing men convinced me of by the time I was 31 and married to that guy, it's, you can't do math, so I'll take care of all the money. Well, it turns out that managing money and investing is basic arithmetic, and anybody can do it. So you can master the skill. Do not let it intimidate you, and make it your mission, not only to become rich, but to become good with money. That is where equality and freedom come from.
Absolutely. And also, I like to tell my women, like, educate yourself on money. Like, if you don't understand what investing is, like, up your money IQ. It is incredibly empowering. I went to this seminar last year that was all about this really high level stuff that ultra rich people do, like family banking and, all these types of like investment accounts and stuff that I just had never really understood. But man, I left there and I was like, damn, I understand all that now. Okay, great. Let's go. How am I going to get there?
Exactly. Listen, if mediocre men can figure out tax optimization, for crying out loud, I can too.
You're damn right.
So
you're damn right.
And
girl.
It turns out they were all lying to me all those years. I'm very good with money.
Yes.
I just didn't know it.
Yes, girl, I love it. I love it. Well, listen, as we wrap this up, and because, girl, I could just, yes, you are. What did you call yourself, Miss Maisel? Or what was that? Yeah, I'm like, yes, girl, you are. You definitely are. And you're super entertaining, and I love it. As we wrap this up, though, I would love to share with the listeners, though, just one thought before we go, which is if you could eliminate one belief from overachieving women that keeps them stuck, what would that be?
I know this already. The main belief, the most invulnerable belief, is I know this already or I got this. That's why I say that the real threshold to cross is admit that you don't know this and that you could use some help. That was the groundbreaking moment for me, Amber. I was sitting in front of my first coach, Jen Sincero. She wrote a series of books called You Are a Badass. Very, very successful.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember saying, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can you help me? I think that might have been one of the only times in my life I've said anything like that. I'm trying so hard. Why is this not working? That was the crack that let all the light in. If you can be easy on yourself to the point where you can admit that you don't know what you don't know, you are going to start going through the magic tunnel.
I love that. Keren, thank you so much for being here. I am smiling ear to ear because I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I cannot wait to get my hands on your book. So where can the listeners find Gilded and also your podcast? Where can they find you? All the things.
Gilded can be found wherever books are sold, and including on Audible and on Kindle, though I will say this is a living, breathing workbook, so I would personally get a physical copy. And the Coached podcast is wherever podcasts are distributed as well. You can find me on KerenEldad. That's really important. I'm not a Karen. I'm a Keren. And I love hearing from people. I love doing clarity calls if anybody has resonated with this and would like to go a little bit further. And like I said to Amber, gosh, I sure wish we had these resources when we were going through this.
Yes.
Because it's really hard to go through alone.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for being so amazing. I appreciate your time, Keren.
Thank you.